Is America on the verge of its own great purge? What do the words and the actions of the left suggest? I think we ought to be listening to what they're actually saying and watching what they're actually doing and believing what we hear. Caroline Glick, columnist at Newsweek and Israel's Hayom, Israel's widest circulation paper, has written, I think, a very insightful article that actually tracks with what the left is saying on this issue, and she joins us now. Caroline, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony. It's always great being on your program.
All right, you have said we are looking at the Great Purge, an event without precedent in American history. Explain.
Well, I think that we've really seen very clearly since Biden took office, President Biden took office, that there's a real push to purge Trump supporters, not just the president, who's about to be facing a Senate trial for an impeachment, but actually his followers as well, from public life in the United States by cancel culture, by saying that people who serve for the president shouldn't be allowed to find jobs. There's blacklists that are being put out of people who worked with the president, his advisors, by organizations like the Lincoln Project, which is a project of former Republicans that was formed to demonize Republicans over the past election cycle in order to elect Democrats to power, and other groups as well. And we also see it with the very bizarre response to the Capitol Hill event on January 6th, because, of course, the vast majority of the hundreds of thousands of people who came to the capital city of Washington, D.C. that day were completely nonviolent. And yet we see this effort to criminalize everybody who was in Washington that day, to boycott and harm businesses that served them, that accepted their money in payment, places like hotels, VRBO, the website that rents out homes and vacation homes mainly, that worked with supporters of Trump on January 6th in the Capitol. You see banks that are refusing service to the president, the former president, Donald Trump, from Deutsche Bank and others. And you also see former military commanders, intelligence commanders, leaders in the United States, and legislators who are calling for treating and taking legislative steps towards treating Trump supporters as domestic terrorists. So all of these things are unprecedented in American history, and much worse than we saw in the 1950s under the McCarthy House On-American Activities Committee and the blacklist of communists and communist sympathizers in the United States. We've never seen anything like this in the United States before.
Yes, and as we talk about this, still on the streets of D.C. here, we have National Guard troops going to remain here through March. And, this back this past summer when, I had to walk through riot lines to get to our office here, the officials, Democratic officials here in D.C. did not want the presence of the National Guard. As other cities across America, led by Democratic mayors, burned. There was this, that's just peaceful protest. Clearly a double standard, because I also want to zero in on something else that highlights this double standard, this hypocrisy of Democrats, of liberals, is that while members like Josh Hawley, who's, by the way, is going to be on the program tomorrow, Ted Cruz, who legitimately questioned an election filled with irregularities, and they simply were challenging specific states that did not follow their laws, and now they're being called upon to resign. Corporate America combining with liberal politicians, the left, to deny funds, call for them to step down, when Democrats did the same thing in previous elections, 2016, 2005. They've done the very thing that Republicans did this time, but there was no call for them to resign.
Right. It isn't just that. I mean, I think that the real concern here is that there seems to be a fusion between a lot of the major corporations in the United States, including the tech giants and the Democratic Party, and that's really something, again, that we haven't seen before. It's not exactly capitalism and free market capitalism like we've known it when you have a fusion of operations and interests and positions being put forward by corporate giants in a political party in the United States. And that particular political party also controls all elected arms of the federal government. This is something that it does look a lot more like classical fascism in Italy in the 1930s than it does like what we're used to in the United States. And you take that together with the fact that small businesses in the United States have taken such a mortal blow over the past year with the COVID lockdowns, while people like
Democratic governors and mayors, by the way.
Right.
Authoritarian action by these Democratic leaders. Sorry, but I wanted to put that in there.
No, I think it's important, and when you look at the amounts of money that people like Jeff Bezos have made, I mean, I think that he made close to $100 billion over the past 10 months of the coronavirus, while all of the local retail shops are shuttering and going bankrupt because of the lockdown. So, I mean, this is a breakdown of the capitalist system in the United States, and what's replacing it is something, again, that we haven't seen before, because you had presidents at the turn of the 20th century that worked very hard with antitrust legislation to block the kinds of trust, the kind of cartels and cartelization of the U.S. economy, which in and of itself was to a much smaller degree back 120 years ago than it is today.
Caroline, I want to point to an article, or quote from an article in Salon, a liberal rag, but it speaks to your point. This cancel culture. This is not let's make up and we're all going to be good Americans. That's not what the left wants. I'm going to read to you from this piece in Salon. Quote, but Biden's humanity, this is referring to his inaugural address, but Biden's humanity and fundamental decency and generosity of spirit could also prove to be his great weakness. The central theme of the president's inaugural address was unity. He wants to reunite the tens of millions of Trump political cult members with the rest of normal society. To accomplish this goal, Biden is asking good Americans, those who believe in democracy, to reach out to Trump's followers and other Republicans, a group of people who have repeatedly shown that they reject multiracial democracy and embrace authoritarianism and fascism, end quote. Boy, again, the left loves to project their own values and ideals onto the right.
The thing that's so distressing about things like this is that they're coming very, very frequently. I mean, you have calls in the media in the United States, in places like CNN, to shut down other media organizations like Fox News that are conservative. We've never had something like this before, calls for mass censorship by media organizations. We've never seen anything like this before in U.S. history. And yes, this incredible hatred, this demonization of 74 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump is very dangerous. Again, all of this is unprecedented. And the weird thing about the accolades that the president's inaugural address has received is that his speech has some nice parts in it, but he also referred to his opponents as white supremacists. And while I'm sure that there are many white supremacists who oppose Biden, just as there are many white supremacists who oppose President Trump, to try to put them to say that they are the face of 74 million Americans is just an insult not only to people's intelligence, but also to their morality. I mean, it's, and to our eyesight. Trump won more minority votes than any Republican had since 1960, and he was able to really break the whole identity politics vibe that American politics had been under since really the time of Obama mainly, but by the rising tide, raises all ships. That income levels and employment levels across all sectors of the United States, of all groups of Americans went up. There was the lowest unemployment among African Americans, among Hispanic Americans, among women in the Trump economy until the pandemic set in of all time. So, he raised up all Americans in the economic levels of the United States across the board, and that shattered their whole paradigm. And they're bringing it back now in a way, again, that is unprecedented. And I think I've used the word unprecedented probably 100 times in a very brief interview with you. But it's true. I mean, that's the thing that's so stunning, that the pace of events, that the demonization, that the use of the federal government against law-abiding American citizens, and the fusion of the most powerful corporations in world history with the ruling party of the United States, of all three elected branches of government. And this is the kind of power that's being brought to bear today against half of the country that we really just have never seen it before. And it is very disturbing. And it's very important to talk about it because people have to be aware and people have to protect their right to freedom of speech and the right to really see what's happening and not to put blinders on lest they be silenced and shunned and canceled.
I agree 100%. It's not a pretty picture, but we've got to look at it because the only way we can go forward is to understand what we're up against. And I think, as you pointed out, President Trump put their identity politics on the ropes, and now they're coming back swinging like a madman, and they're landing some punches. But what President Trump did, in the way, as you pointed out, his policies elevated all elements of society, all economic classes. Everyone benefited. America benefited. Don't back away from those policies. Maybe there's a different messenger, but those policies have proven to work. Caroline Glick, I want to thank you for joining me. I've got a link to your piece on my site. Excellent article, very insightful, and I'm going to encourage people to take a look at it. And again, great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.